Hi, this is Mark Arnold with yet another Fun Ideas podcast, and today I have a special guest. He's worked for Marvel and DC Comics, among other things. We're interviewing him today for Crazy Magazine, which is a Marvel publication from 1973 to 83, but we'll probably talk about Batman or something else, Superman or something else at this point, too. How are you today, sir?
I'm all right. I'm all right. I've honestly, Crazy Magazine was my first professional job, kinda. So I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay. And like I said, primarily we're going to talk about that, but I'll probably ask you about other things. When you got interested in working in publications like this, was your goal to work for a humor magazine, or were you just trying to get into comic books? What were you
Oh,
trying to do?
I went to the High School of Art and Design, and I went to the School of Visual Arts, which is a college in New York, and I wanted to draw superhero comics. That's what I wanted to be Neil Adams Jr. But when I was in high school, I got selected for an internship program at DC,
Hmm,
and my job was to Xerox pages as they came in and give them to the editors. And I looked at Walt Simonson art and Jack Kirby art and Bernie Wrightson art, and I was like, I am never going to be this good because I am not going to learn how to draw everything. Because when you draw comics, superhero comics, action comics, you got to draw everything. You never know what the writer's going to throw at you. You got to, if you hate drawing horses, guaranteed you're going to have to draw horses all the time.
hmm,
So I knew I didn't have the patience to be like that, but I was an okay cartoonist.
hmm.
And I just said, well, I've just decided I'm going to try to be a cartoonist instead of a, whatever you call it, a superhero action, I don't know, wow, what would you call that? A
Or like
graphic novelist.
realistic figures or whatever,
Yeah, and I
artists
just
with good
I just said
perspective and all that.
I know that this so that internship really helped me in a
Hmm.
way. At the same time, as you'll know, humor does not sell at all.
I
Humor
know.
it was a dying thing already in the 70s
Hmm.
by the time I was in high school. And I was like, uh-oh, this is maybe not a good idea. And when I got out of college, I studied with Harvey Kurtzman at the School of Visual Arts. You can't get any better than that, except that I also studied with Will Eisner, and you can't get any better than that. But I learned different things from each of them because one of them is a humorist and one of them is a graphic novelist or whatever
Yeah,
you want to call it.
yeah.
And when I got out of college, I was like, okay, now I'm gonna go and bring my portfolio out. And I had all my rejection slips from National Lampoon and the New Yorker for my cartoons piled up. But I looked at Mad Magazine and I was like, well, it says the usual gang of idiots for a reason because it's the same people all the time, and
Right.
there's no getting in there. That's a closed shop.
Yeah.
And then I looked at Cracked Magazine and I was like, I didn't know who the publisher was. I never heard of this company. And I was like, what if I do work there and they don't pay me or whatever?
Hmm.
And then I said, well, Crazy comes out of Marvel and Marvel pays their guys. That I know.
Hmm.
So let me, I cold called up to Marvel. I just called the art director, who at the time was Marie Severin. And she said, oh, well, I am the art director, but you got to get past the editor. So you should call Larry Hama, who is the current editor of Crazy. And I called Larry and he set up an appointment. He looked at my portfolio and at the end of the portfolio, he goes, well, I don't really like your drawing so much, but your jokes are pretty good. Do you have anything else? And I had my sketchbooks, which were packed with jokes. I mean, I just had a million stupid jokes in these sketchbooks. And he said, well, what if you did a page of just these jokes? And I said, I got four of these books filled with jokes. So that they were already written. I just got to figure out how to clump them all together. And that's how I got the page of stuff for
Wow.
And it really was that. And I don't think Larry was wrong. My drawing is not that good. My cartooning is not as good. And but my writing is okay. I
Mhm.
think I'm all right there. So so I did the page of stuff every month. He gave me the inside back cover, which I couldn't believe. You know, that to me is that's the fold-in page. That's like a
Right.
that's a real page. And then just through the course of being up there, I pitched other things to them. They let me do a three-page parody of the Walkman sensation that was a new
Hmm.
thing back then.
Yeah.
And I got to do a couple of children's book parodies. I wrote one for Dr. Seuss that Steve Mellor drew,
Hmm.
and I wrote and drew my own Curious George one, which was mixed with Mickey Spillane type stuff. And and I got to do some side things that were really fun. And then Larry once again came up with the idea of doing something with malapropisms, something that where something just is the wrong word for the right thing. And I came up with the Dirk McGurk report,
Right.
which became my second regular feature there. And boy, did not being able to draw really help there, because it was supposed to be a kid's drawings, and
Right.
I got paid the full page rate for that. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm being paid to draw badly. And, but I got to write these weird little, book reports on whatever I felt like.
Right.
Larry was great. He didn't, no, nobody messed with me. Nobody, they seemed to like what I was doing. And apparently the mail was good on Dirk McGurk, especially, which is ridiculous to me. And again, it was just like, it was just a fun thing to be a part of. And then that, just by going up to the offices and dropping off my stuff, Larry called me one day. I was working in a rug factory
Mm.
as well as doing the crazy stuff. And I got fired from that job. Hey, don't ask me how you get fired from the rug factory, but I did it. Uh, and yeah, I was
There's
working
a
in,
joke there somewhere, like I couldn't hook it or something. I don't
there's a lot of
know.
jokes. I was in the art department in the rug factory, and we would draw the rugs onto canvas, and then they'd had all these hookers. So I
Hmm.
worked with 28 hookers.
Yeah.
That's the joke that's in
All
there.
right, there we go.
So, but I got fired from that job uh, because I defied the boss one day,
Mhm.
and ultimately, I told Larry, and he understood. And then a couple of weeks later, he goes, "Do you want to be an assistant editor?" And I
Huh?
went, "Sure." I didn't know what that
Nah.
was. I didn't know what that meant. I was like, it's a job with benefits. Woo!
Mhm.
I like this. And I interviewed with Mark Grunwald, and we really hit it off right away. Now, I don't know who else he interviewed. I don't know if there were better people or worse people, or if he almost didn't hire me and other people had to talk him into it. I don't know. And I try to not know. I don't want, but I got into the gang working on superhero comics, and that was the goal. And I knew the stuff from being a fan. I spoke the lingo. I
Mhm.
knew how to talk to artists and writers
Mhm.
because I'm able to do it, just not well. And I think that that's one of the jokes to me, is like those who can do, those who can't edit, and those who can't edit, uh, I guess are me. So I was assistant editor for a couple of years, and I got to write some comics for Marvel.
Mhm.
I wrote a thing for Bizarre Adventures that was like a Christmas holiday thing,
Mhm.
uh, and I got to draw that as well. So thank you, Denny O'Neil, for that opportunity. And then I got to be the regular writer on Kazar
Mhm.
and uh, and Captain America. And I got to be doing these things, and I was like, how did this even happen? I don't know. But it was awesome. It was great. And if you look at my stuff, you could see that I was always trying to put humor in,
Yeah.
even though notoriously, no offense to any of your listeners or readers, humor, superhero fans are not fans of humor. They don't like their superheroes to come with a lot of stuff that pokes fun at them or whatever.
Yeah.
But luckily, Bruce Jones and Brent Anderson had started Kazar with a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek style, so that kind of fit. That made sense.
Mhm.
And then we did Assistant Editors Month, and I got to be the editor of some humorous stuff, and some of it was involved David Letterman's show
Mhm.
and things like that. But I got to write what I think is my favorite thing I ever did, which was a Marvel team up, which was Galactus and Aunt May. No, it was Franklin Richards and Aunt May,
Hmm.
and Aunt May became Galactus's herald.
Oh, I
So
remember that actually, but
her
yeah.
name was Golden Oldie, and that was awesome for me.
Hmm.
I may have sucked for the readers, but I loved it. I loved working on that,
Yeah.
and it's to me, it was just fun for me, and I think anyone who read it had fun. I think that month maybe people were mad that it wasn't a serious Marvel team up, but now 40 years later, it's pretty good. It's fun. So I did that for a while, and then I moved up to being an editor, and I got to write Captain America. I wrote The Thing for a while as well,
Mhm.
and introduced wrestling into the storyline. Uh, Unfortunately, about 5 or 10 years before wrestling got really big, so it was wrestling was huge when I was a kid, and then it kind of faded away, and
Right.
just kind of made sense for my storyline. So it was fun to do that. And then I got fired from Marvel. Uh,
Wow.
that was a good thing. And luckily it was at a time when the editor in chief didn't like my work or didn't like me or whatever. And he's the boss. That's okay. I get it. But luckily a lot of people had left Marvel to go work at DC because of such interference from above.
Mhm.
I just called up Denny O'Neil, who had left like 6 months earlier, and I said, "Hey, I just got canned." And he goes, "Well, I don't know if there's any jobs here, but I'll take you to lunch." And I was like, "Great," because I don't have any money to eat anymore. And so we went to lunch, and he introduced me to Dick Giordano. And obviously, I had worked with John Byrne on the Fantastic Four book,
Mhm.
and he had just come over to DC also for similar reasons to work on Superman. And John said, I can work with Mike if you need to switch editors or whatever. Mike and we're okay. And I was like, this is great. And I thank him for that, and I have thanked him publicly for that because I'm sure that had a big part of getting me in at DC, even though I was an intern in 1974, and that should have counted for something.
People forget things like that.
Well, most of the people weren't
Yeah.
there. Paul Levitz was around. He was the
Yeah.
only one that was there.
Mhm.
Dick Giordano was working for DC then, but not as an executive.
Hmm.
But anyway, so a few months after I got canned, I was back on staff at DC, and the rest is history. And I
Now,
got to write some Star Trek comics. Oh, I forgot I wrote He-Man for a while. And I
mhm.
got to do some fun things that were not necessarily the superhero-y stuff. I did a Metal Men miniseries that my innovations did not stick at all. But that's okay. That's part of the job and part of the show. It's
Right.
like to me, what I learned was the characters who stick, and there's not a lot of them.
Mhm.
Harley Quinn was one of them,
Mhm.
and Damien has become another one. Robin, the new
Mhm.
Robin. Those are two, and they only stick because someone who other than the creator wants to do something with them.
Right.
And that's when if somebody says, "Hey, can I use your Harley Quinn character in this thing?" that's when the character starts catching on. So
Right.
nobody was into my Metal Men stuff, and that's okay. Really, it's part of the gig. And I had a day job, which was editor on the Superman stuff, and that worked out okay.
Hmm.
I think I did a good job for Superman, and that
Cool.
that counts a lot.
Mhm.
So I just kind of fast forwarded through my whole life, and
Right.
now
And we're done. Thanks. No, I'm just kidding. I have a lot of questions that have been building up in my head. It always happens, but I just like to let the guests speak, and then I come back to say, "All right, why did you do that then?"
that's the
So,
preamble.
so anyway, you started off at crazy with the Pageo stuff. When you said that you had sketchbooks full of all this stuff, I mean, was it so completed that you just literally cut and paste from your sketchbooks, or did you have to redraw all that stuff?
I redrew it all and relaid it out, and because there was jokes in there from the first sketchbook, and there was jokes from the third sketchbook, there was jokes from all over the place, and I just kind of put a mishmash page together. And
Hmm.
then I drew myself in as the host of this page,
Hmm.
as if I was steering people through my stupid brain. And, it was fun, and I got to do, there's oddball ones. I did a parody of Superman called Everyday Man.
Yeah.
Was a full page on one topic. That was fun. I think, and then I did a page of about getting fired at the rug factory,
Hmm.
where I'm standing there in front of a barrel. I'm wearing a barrel because I don't have a job,
Hmm.
and it's just a giant word balloon, to the point where I think tried to pay the guy who lettered the page money from my paycheck, because it was not fair. It was a whole page of just lettering. But it was fun for me. I got to vent. I got to just put it out there, and nobody knew what that I was
Yeah.
talking about the rug factory, but I was talking about getting fired.
Yeah. I
So that
remember that one because of a lot of the words. I'd have to reread it again, but yeah, I remember it was different.
there's some funny stuff if you know what went down,
Yeah.
but it's all cut off by the my big figure or
Right.
some other.
Yeah, the
There's a
words just
couple of
keep
little
going off the
there's
screen, as it
and
were,
there's a couple of
Yeah.
little panels of jokes in there.
Yeah.
Nothing that really matters to the
Right.
world.
Now,
It
I
was
don't
just
remember
fun.
all your jokes. I mean, I have looked at the issues recently because I'm working on this crazy book, but the one that always stood out, and it's just so dumb, I actually love it. And
That's it.
it proves it, what, 40 years later, I still,
That's
you
the
know,
key to me. I
is
think.
is your silly Three Stooges joke where you go, Larry's fine, but Joe's besser.
Oh, I
That's
made
the
that
one I
up.
remember without looking at the pages and looking.
I made that up in high school,
Yeah,
and
I figured.
I
Well, I was
still
in high
use it.
school when I was reading it. I said,
I
"That's
can still
incredible."
use it. Well, that was an era where people knew who Larry Fine and Joe
Yeah,
Besser were.
now it probably wouldn't work.
It
Everybody's like,
doesn't fly
"I like
as much unless
Curly," and
you're
that's it.
at
Yeah,
a Three Stooges convention.
yeah. But I know there was other good jokes, but that was the one that just always stood out in my mind. And
Well,
I even repeated it a few times, and people go, "Ooh,"
yeah, it's a
Anyway,
dad joke from before I was a dad,
yeah, exactly.
and before they even
But yeah,
knew what dad's jokes were.
yeah. But that's the one that always stood out.
Well,
One thing. Also, it seemed like your stuff that you did at Crazy actually inspired later Mad things. I don't know if
oh,
this was
really? I didn't know that.
coincidence. Well, your Dirk McGurk page
Uh-huh.
always kind of reminded me later when they did like this fictitious web page called Planet Tad they did for about 10
Oh,
years or so.
I'm a big fan of that Planet Ted
Yeah,
page.
yeah. And I'm wondering,
It's
because I've
not.
never talked to the guy who did Planet Ted, if he ever saw your page and kind of got inspired, but it's not
y-
exactly the same,
Did you
but
talk to him about
no, I
it?
have not.
Oh,
No.
well, he's the main producer on the John Oliver show now.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah,
Couldn't get
he's gonna be
everybody,
he's
you
a
know.
harder get than me, I'll tell you that. But I like that. I didn't get the sense that he was doing malapropisms as much as
That's true.
he was just doing a little kid,
Yeah,
and a kid's blog, which didn't blogs didn't exist when I was working on
right,
Crazy.
right.
So that I didn't get the sense that it was the same, but I did. that was actually a feature in Mad that I thought was probably one of their more progressive things in a
Yeah.
time where I would have said Mad was a little robotic and a little much the
Yeah.
same all the time. And by the time Crazy got canceled, and I this is all Larry Hama, I really think that they were getting as far away from just being a Mad copy.
Yeah.
And there was still movie parodies and things like that, but the art wasn't just here's another Mort Drucker.
Hmm.
It was like it was a new look, it was a new style. I think they did some smart things by putting in Teen Hulk.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're published by Marvel, why not mooch off of that stuff?
Yeah.
They did these re-lettered pages of famous Marvel stories, and I was like, this is just great.
Hmm.
It's not anything that Mad does.
Right.
And I think that that was maybe that's why they got canceled.
I don't
I
know. Yeah.
I think ultimately that just magazines in general were starting to already not do well,
Yeah.
and Mad Crazy cost more than a regular comic book to put together because the page rates were higher to compete with Mad, and it was just a tougher sell.
Do you
And
remember what those page rates were at the time?
I mean,
I mean, if you don't, that's fine. I'm just
well, I mean,
curious
I
because
can
I
tell
know
you,
Mads was like around that time was something like 400 a page. It might have
well,
even been higher.
for
So I.
me, for me, when I wrote and drew something, I
Mhm.
got $500 a page. I
Okay.
don't know what the writing breakdown was. I don't know what penciling. I don't know what inking was.
Yeah.
But so that meant on page of stuff and Dirk McGurk, which was not really drawn at all.
Yeah,
I
little
got
stick figures.
I got like 1500. I got 1,500 a month, and
Oh wow.
my shared rent at the time was 500 a month. So I was like, this is I can buy a big large pizza now. This is awesome. So it was
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I got. I don't know if other people got more or less, but it is, and that's 40 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty decent, I think.
Hmm.
Maybe, and
Another oh,
that was maybe a reason why Crazy couldn't keep going
right.
compared to here's the next issue of Dazzler, you know.
Right. But well, I do know this because they used to put the sales figures.
Yeah.
It seemed to do well like the when Hama first took over, like the first couple years, and then like the third year, it really nosedived. And I don't know if that had to do with video games or
Yeah, I think
direct market or both or what.
all of that was part of it. I think, like I said, I think even like real magazines like Time and Newsweek, everybody just started doing poorly. And even to this day, it's like Playboy is gone. It's like that's not a competitor to Mad, but National Lampoon's been gone for decades.
Right.
And these things, they there's no audience for this stuff in
Yeah.
print. I mean, where's a newsstand anyway? I don't even see a
Yeah.
news.
I mean, I'm one of those weirdos, probably because of my age, is that I go to Barnes and Noble. That's my
Okay,
newsstand.
yeah,
Um,
they have
and
everything.
the humor magazines basically are done except for Mad, and it's all reprints. So, but yeah, back in the day when Crazy was around, I actually preferred Crazy over Cracked, in those
Me
days. So,
too.
so when Cracked came out, I'd buy it for a few months and then I'd stop and then I'd buy it again. When Crazy was canceled, I replaced it all with Cracked at that point and they also changed editors at that point. I don't know if you know who Mort Todd is, but he became a
Yeah.
younger, hipper editor, and
Well,
he kind of carried on the torch of what Larry Hama was doing in the early
yeah,
'80s into the late
and
'80s. So,
he was when I got canned at Marvel. I
yeah.
didn't go right to DC, so
Hmm.
I had a few months in between. And Mort hired me to do stuff for Cracked.
Okay.
I did a Dirk McGurk ripoff called Dougie Dugan.
I think I
But
remember that now.
he
Yes.
liked that. He liked Dirk McGurk. So I said, well, I can't do Dirk McGurk, but I'll give you Dougie Dugan. I just
Uh-huh.
made up a new name. And I also I wrote a Thundercats parody,
Yeah.
which was fun because I was the editor of the Thundercats comic at Marvel.
Hmm.
So I knew all the stupid stuff and then Thundercats. Uh, but Steve Ditko drew it. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is it. This is great. I like this life. I could deal with this. But there were only two humor magazines left.
Right, right.
And I never got to do anything for Mad, even though they were in the building with me and I was friendly with the people
That's
who
funny.
worked
Yeah, I
on it.
didn't even think about that all DC. It's like,
I got to be in one of their the photo things a
hmm,
couple of times, so that was fun. So
hmm,
I'm in it, but I didn't get to create anything for it.
hmm, okay. That's surprising he didn't even get in as a writer, but hey, they were
Well,
kind of, I guess, their separate thing, even
well,
if
it
you're
was
together. Yeah,
even towards, all those years later, it was still the usual gang of idiots. It was,
yeah, yeah.
why are they going to push out, Al Jaffe for me? No, they shouldn't.
Page stuff, Page stuff.
Vic
Anyway,
DiBartolo, I think he wins every time,
yeah,
and of course Sergio should be in there forever.
right, right. One other thing before I forget on Dirk McGurk that I think, if it isn't inspired, it just reminds me of it, is that children's book series, and they've even made a feature film of
Yeah,
Diary of a
yeah,
Nerdy Kid.
that's closer. Yeah.
Yeah, and that reminded me of Dirk McGurk too, and I was like, I wonder if he saw that or if it's
Well,
just inspiration.
tell your
Yeah,
friends that that Dirk McGurk was a thing because nobody knows.
yeah, yeah.
And to be associated with that is great because I think that that's a great series. I think it's fun, and
Hmm.
it's not for me. It is
Yeah,
definitely for kids, but that's okay. Uh, and I think it's a great thing, and it got to be a movie because it's a great thing,
yeah, yeah.
and that's a great franchise, and I'm sure that you don't have to have seen everything to. Sometimes this stuff is just in the zeitgeist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, where did you come up with Dirk McGurk? It's probably because of your own school life, right?
I
Yeah.
told you it was really kind of Larry's idea
Oh,
to do something with malapropisms. I guess
okay.
it was kind of
But to do it as like a kid's book report or a kid's
I
letter to her grandmother or
I
his
think
aunt
that
or whatever.
was us brainstorming it together, but
Okay.
then I kind of came up with all the other stuff, and I came up with the subjects every month of what it was
Hmm.
going to be. And I would draw it all out rough style.
Yeah.
If you can say that Dirk McGurk ever has a rougher style than what it ends up being. But it always went over pretty well, even in the office. People around the office would tell me that they read it and thought it was good. And that always goes a long way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was Larry's initial idea to do malapropisms. I think because it was right around when John Lennon was assassinated,
Hmm.
and John Lennon used to his books had a lot of
Oh
malapropisms
yeah.
in,
Yeah.
and I think Larry might have reread one of them around that time. So he
Yeah.
thought that that would be a fun thing to have in Crazy.
And supposedly Ringo was just doing them naturally. And
Yeah, he's
that's
the
how they got
Yogi.
A Hard Day's Night, that title, and
Yeah,
you
he's
know.
the Yogi Berra of the Beatles.
He doesn't seem to do malapropisms nowadays, but that might be years of not drinking or something. I don't know.
Well, now he just says
Anyway,
peace and love. It's hard to
yeah,
mix
exactly.
that up.
But another one was Tomorrow Never Knows. That was a Ringo malapropism that I
Oh,
remember. But anyway, and then Lennon appropriated it for a title of his song. So, and they
yeah.
don't even say it in the lyrics. It's just, you know. um, one thing I noticed is you carried on when you did an assistant editor month. You did a few more Pajo stuffs,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that was that like, could you do anything that month? I'll say for first, oh my god, I'm just knock on the door. Right. Anyway, anyway,
I'm waiting
um,
for my dog to start barking.
I lost my train of thought. It was about,
Talking about assistant editors month.
assistant editor month. Yes. Um, were you allowed to do anything you wanted that particular month, or
I
did you
mean,
have to follow any rules? I mean, it sounded like you didn't, and you put
well, we
anything
ran
and
it
everything
past
in there.
we ran it past the editors, and if they said okay, then it was
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we were going to be ruining their book,
Yeah.
and the one book I worked on that I didn't do anything to was Thor because
Hmm.
Walt Simonson had just taken it over and he
Hmm.
just started his whole Beta Ray Bill thing. And it was like 3 issues into his run.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't screw with this. I
Well, you
just,
did get a page of stuff in there. It was you and
but
Simonson's page of stuff. I remember
instead
that.
of the letters page, I and that was one where I only penciled it and Walt
Hmm.
inked it. So that
Hmm.
was fun for me too.
Yeah.
So that was good. And I think Captain America had the front half of the book was a serious story. Oh,
Yeah.
you know, and Iron Man was the same way. The front
Yeah.
half was serious, and then there was a backup feature that was funny.
Yeah.
Same with Iron Man, because Iron
Hmm.
Man was, you know, Tony Stark was a drunk at the time, so it was hard to interrupt that storyline.
Hmm.
Uh, and the Avengers, we just I contacted David Letterman's managers and said,
Hmm.
"Can we do David Letterman and Paul Schaefer in an issue of Avengers?" And they
Hmm.
said, "Sure."
Did anything to do with that Marvel team up that came a few years earlier with Saturday Night Live have anything to do with getting connections to do that, or is it just totally independent of each other?
Well, that was way before I got
Oh,
there.
okay. Because
Because
they're
that
both
was like,
NBC. I figured NBC might have contacted you, so you went after Letterman then.
no, I said, well, that, you know what? I mean, I'll say that it wasn't an inspiration, but it made me know that that kind of stuff could happen.
Yeah.
So that I then started looking into how do I get this to happen.
Hmm.
And Roger Stern, who was the writer of Avengers at the time, was like all for it. He thought it was the greatest idea because Letterman's show was pretty new at that time.
Yeah.
But we were fans, and you know, honestly, Letterman's show started the week before I started on staff at Marvel,
Hmm.
so it was just like we were into it as
Yeah.
fans of Letterman's style
Yeah.
of humor.
Yeah.
So, but the not ready for primetime player thing was 8 years before that, maybe.
Something like
It
that.
was a
Yeah.
long time.
77, 78 was
Yeah,
the
it was
year
a
that
long
came.
time, but like I said, it was just like, oh, we could do this if we want to. I also remember that Don Rickles was in an issue of Jimmy Olsen, so
Right.
I knew that that stuff could happen. And
I remember.
I
Now,
just
did
expected
Letterman
when,
ever see the issue? I think he did show it
yeah,
on the TV,
yeah.
and if I
I
remember, on
have,
one of his episodes. So
and
he
I've
was happy
posted
with
on,
that. Okay.
I posted on my Facebook page. I got a letter
Yeah.
from him.
Okay.
I still have the letter here somewhere in my
Yeah.
piles of stuff. But piles O stuff. I'm sorry. Yeah. But yeah, he held it up on the air at one point, but it was like way after it was off sale on the newsstand. So it was
Right.
like, help us.
Look what I found in my bottom desk drawer.
If
Hey.
he would have held it up the week it was out, that would have been great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Oh,
I felt like they were doing us a favor, so I didn't. There was no complaint.
yeah. Um, well, at least he liked it, unlike, because I have seen or heard, people when Rickles was around showing him that DC issue,
Uh,
and he just kind of shook his head and just didn't understand why it was even done. So, it's like,
well,
and
he
I
was
don't
a
know if Kirby and Rickles were friends or anything or why it happened, but
well. The
you know,
legend that I always heard was that Kirby bumped into Rickles at some restaurant somewhere, and he just said, "Hey, can I put you in a comic?" And Rickles said, "Yeah, yeah, get out of here."
yeah, so he probably didn't think it was serious. Yeah, he may
Probably
not
didn't
even
know what
know
it
who he
was.
was. Yeah, he probably didn't know
I
what
mean,
it
people
was.
like I mean, there's a lot of people who still, you know, when you tell them that you work on comic books, they're like, they still make those.
Yeah,
You know, it's like it's not, you know, us fans of comic books are not the mainstream.
yeah,
Even though the Marvel movies and even the DC movies to a degree have made the stuff more acceptable, people aren't running out to buy the comic books
no,
based on those
it's
movies.
kind of odd. Yeah.
Well,
So there, so
I wish it
there's
were.
no crazy magazine movie coming out anytime soon.
Nobody's called me about
with
it.
with a real of stuff.
I would be happy to do that. I would be happy to do that. And I'm sure we could find a good little kid actor to be Dirk McGurk. And that would be awesome.
Now, when Crazy was still kind of doing good, you might not have been privy to all this stuff, but I mean, were there any plans to take Crazy in any direction beyond just the publication, or is it too premature?
Well, I mean, that kind of stuff wasn't really happening back then. I mean,
Yeah,
even Mad all
that's
got
true.
one movie
Yeah,
and it was not a good one. And
right.
it was kind of like they glued the Mad name onto a movie they were doing
Well, that's
anyway.
exactly what they did, but yeah.
Yeah, but National Lampoon made people think along those lines.
Yeah.
And then Mad did that Academy thing, and
Right.
that was pretty much the end of that.
At
And
least on the Lampoon one, they had Lampoon writers writing at least the first couple
at the
movies.
beginning, yeah,
Yeah.
but
So,
then they got
but
Mad
on
TV.
Mad, they just, yeah, they literally slapped the name on there, and then Gaines wanted to take it off and managed to for like syndicated rights or something, but on home video, he's Alfred
Oh,
E. Newman's back in there and it says Mad Magazine. So,
yeah.
oh well.
Well, I mean, the thing is, if it was a better movie, it would have been a good move.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
National Lampoon started with some of their later movies, that wouldn't have been a
Oh yeah.
thing. But Animal House and the vacation movies, it's like they started off strong.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
definitely did a good thing at the beginning. And then it just got junkier and junkier and direct to video-y.
Yeah.
It just, there was not a lot of thinking along those lines.
Yeah.
So, and
The only
even,
reason I asked that is because Mort Todd even talked about possibly doing a crack TV show and stuff like that, but he never got anything off the ground. It was
well,
just talking.
Ned was lucky to get the Mad TV show. Uh,
And
and I don't know how the editors at Mad felt about it because it wasn't really a direct copy of Mad.
right.
At the beginning, it had a few more Mad elements, and it had
Yeah.
some Don Martin animations and things like that. And they had a guy walking around in an Alfred E. Newman head.
Yeah.
But that all went away pretty quick, and then it just
Right.
became Saturday Night Live, Second City TV kind of show.
Right.
It was good. It was really good, and it was
Hmm.
a great thing for Mad to have its name on for 10 years.
Yeah.
So it was a good thing. The worst thing about it was that it was right up against Saturday Night Live, which is like that's two shows doing the same thing, and maybe people were, putting it on their VCR or whatever, but it just was a tough competition
Yeah. I
for
think I remember just flipping the channel back and
yeah,
forth.
when the
Yeah.
musical guest would come on, you'd
Yeah.
switch to Mad TV. But
Um,
it's like
Go ahead.
that was the thing. So there wasn't that kind of thinking. Even Marvel superheroes weren't making movies out of them. By the 70s, they did TV movies, and they're all questionable.
That's true. I mean,
Uh,
I guess your most successful thing at the time Crazy was around was the Incredible Hulk TV show.
that was already done by the time I
Well,
was
that's
at
true. That's true.
by the
It
time I
ended
was
by
at
the,
Crazy.
yeah.
But that was where when Larry's ideas of doing Teen Hulk, that could have turned into an animated series very easily.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been a great idea to
Hmm.
do. And it would have been refreshing because it's not the Hulk, but it's like the Hulk, but it's
Hmm.
fun.
Right.
And could have been really good.
I'm surprised Teen Hulk didn't carry on as a standard title, just a
Yeah,
standalone title,
it would have
because
been great.
the only one that came out afterwards was an Obnoxio the Clown versus the X-Men. And
Right.
that
That
was
was
just like a
one.
one shot. And it's like, I don't know how popular that character ever was. It seems
Well,
like Larry loved to just shove that character down people's throats.
I think he was involved in creating him, but it was
Yeah.
also like
Yeah.
a disgusting, obnoxious clown is a funny
Hmm.
thing. I
Hmm.
just don't know if enough of his personality came through in his stories, whereas in Teen Hulk, they were about a teenaged Hulk
Yeah.
and the stories were about a character.
Yeah.
So that's always better.
Yeah. But you already said it, from your word discussion so far, is that humor was on the way out. So I guess that would
Well, it's just not
nix any
respected.
teen Hulk. Yeah.
It's not respected in the comic stores. I mean, which I think is changing. I
Yeah.
think that comic stores are managing to sell a lot more, what do you call it, young adult or yeah, young adult novels, graphic novels that are definitely more humorous slanted, uh, and are not about superheroes, and it's not about the
Right.
superhero fantasy, power fantasy. And I think that's great. I think that's really good. I do think that this stuff can coexist,
Mhm.
but it seems to be that people have to have one thing or the other at any given time.
Yeah.
But that's why I liked working on my last 10 years at DC, I worked on animation,
Hmm.
not the comic books, but I got to work on things like Teen Titans Go,
Mm.
which it was just a pleasure to read those scripts. It was just fun for me. And the diehard Teen Titans fans hate it, but it's because there's no room for humor for them.
Right.
And also, it's not for you. It's for your 6-year-old, 8-year-old brother. It's
Right.
not for you,
Yeah.
you 50-year-old guy.
Yeah.
It's for someone else. And it's okay. And
Yeah.
I've talked to Marv Wolfman and George Perez about that show.
Yeah.
And for my money, nobody acts out of character.
Hmm.
Even though it's over the top and outrageous and stupid, everyone's in character
Yeah.
just to an outrageous level,
Yeah.
and a stupid, silly level.
Yeah.
And it, that I think was, that's where, I didn't have to do this because the guys working on the show kind of knew to do that. But that's where I would watch for things. I would just say, can we not have Robin be like this? Let's have him be like this because that's the way he is as a straight hero, and that's what you should be parodying is
Yeah.
how weird it is that he's the way he is even in the straight comics.
Right.
So it was fun to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm one of the a few weirdos that likes some humor in my superhero. So I actually enjoyed that. Over the years, I've enjoyed Adam West Batman.
Hmm.
I like the humorous elements of Christopher Reeve's Superman, but there is a fine line. Like I never liked the Richard Pryor one, for example. They went a
Right.
little too far.
Yeah.
And
And well,
then
it also wasn't funny. That's
yeah,
the real key.
yeah, that's true. I mean, if you're going to do a humorous version, yeah, make it funny. And
Yeah.
then, but on like all the Marvel movies, the ones I like the best, I like the Guardians of the Galaxy, humorous.
Yeah.
I like Thor Ragnarok, that's a humorous one.
Yeah.
Ant-Man, Deadpool, they have
Right.
elements
And
of
you also
humor in
see
them.
there's a backlash on the Thor movies now
Yeah,
because they're only humorous,
yeah,
and I think that that's unfortunate. But at the same, like why shouldn't Thor have a different flavor than a Captain America movie? I mean, they should
right.
have different flavors.
Yeah,
Uh, so I don't know. It there is a difference between comedy relief
yeah,
and comedy,
right.
so I prefer both. I mean, if you go through my run on Superman, there was definitely comedy relief in there.
Yeah, yeah.
Bibbo, a character in our Superman comics, was totally comedy relief, and he's a popular character still.
Hmm.
So, does he have his own comic book? No, he
They
shouldn't.
probably never will.
Shouldn't. He's an element of something that worked well.
Yeah,
He's not what worked well. So, but he was not, while Brainiac is attacking Metropolis, Bibbo was doing something that was kind of different than what Superman was doing.
hmm,
So that was good.
hmm. Um, I guess I just wanted to ask you a little bit about like you did a little run on Star Trek. I guess are you looking by at the pictures of the movie posters? It's this Mad 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 World, Cat Ballou.
Yeah,
You tend to like the humorous
I
movies
like the
too.
humor.
So
I mean, I don't
so
apologize for that. Yeah, I don't
so
I don't have any pictures of Star Trek around
okay.
here.
But Star Trek does have elements of humor too at times.
And
It's like
that's why I liked it. And
yeah.
I can't tell you why they picked me to write those comics,
Hmm.
but I was happy to have the work,
Hmm.
obviously. And I liked writing the regular comic, and I even there I tried to put in some humor,
Hmm.
and then I got to write the Next Generation miniseries
Hmm.
from the Bible. The show didn't exist yet,
Hmm.
and in the Bible, Jean-Luc Picard was actually French.
Wow.
So my stupid miniseries where he's running around saying "Sacre Bleu" is somebody at Paramount should have stopped that
Yeah.
because they knew more about what was going on with the show than I did.
Yeah.
And we had other stuff like there was supposed to be a lot of families on the ship.
Yeah.
We did a bickering family couple, and I did, and they were humorous.
Yeah.
And then I got to do one of the Christmas episode of my miniseries involved the Grinch or
Hmm.
an alien that kind of looked like the Grinch. And it was just like a fun episode, but the rest of it was serious to the point where they even stole one of the ideas from my miniseries by having Riker become a Q,
Hmm.
which I did in the comic first.
Hmm.
So it was a lot of, because I knew right from reading the Bible that Q was going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Great,
Well, it
great thing.
seems like because there's the shows themselves, the movies, the comic book adaptations, the audiobook adaptations, the book adaptations, this, that, and the other, eventually everything's going to cross paths. Even
Or
yeah,
they're able to diverge. It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
there's a lot of room for a lot of different stuff.
yeah.
I haven't read the Peter David novels or novelizations or whatever he did, but
Hmm.
I know Peter and he can't do anything without throwing humor into it.
Yeah,
So I'm sure there was a lot of humor in those
yeah,
books. And there is room for that, especially Star Trek had, almost always every episode would end with a womp womp.
yeah,
womp.
yeah, exactly. Where there'll be no dribble at all, whatever,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah.
And they all had that and Tranya for everybody. It's just
Yeah.
they were all a little funny at the ends, which I thought was always great. And that's why I liked that show when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Uh, it,
It's go ahead. I'm
it
sorry.
was my mother's favorite show because she thought Kirk was cute. Stayed out of that.
um it's interesting every time you mentioned something you said that it kind of came to you. Was there anything you chose over the your career that you said, I want to do that, and they said, all right, you can do it?
I never felt like I was in a position to choose. I mean,
Yeah.
I wasn't Alan Moore, you
Yeah.
know, I wasn't, but I mean, Metal Men was one that I chose because I was a
Okay,
Metal
there you
Men
go.
fan from when I
Yeah,
was a kid.
yeah.
And I involved Dan Jurgens at an early period because we were working on Superman. So that helped get that done. And I mean, I pitched the whole thing and they bought into it and it just didn't stick, like I said. But
Hmm.
it was fun. And that was the one thing I went after. Everything else, it was just like I was the guy in the doorway at the right time when they needed a hole to fill.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's a fine way to work if you're able to pull that off. Because to me, a lot of the reason I wanted to have the staff jobs is the whole idea of having to hustle up your next gig while you're doing gigs is ridiculous to me. It's like I can't, I can do one or the other.
Yeah,
And I just was like, I can't do that. I just can't do it.
yeah.
You know,
I've
so,
never been one to be totally freelance either. I like to have the steady 9 to 5 job. Mine's in healthcare, so I mean, it's
uh-huh.
something completely different. But I mean, that pays for the bread and butter on Monday through Friday, and then on the weekends and the evenings and everything else, I can do podcasts, I can write books, I can write articles, I can do all
Yeah.
the other stuff, and still
Yeah.
have
So
a
I mean, now that I'm retired,
yeah.
I'm available to do things. If anybody wants to call me up to do
Hmm.
humorous stuff or even a superhero thing, I know
Hmm.
how to do both of them.
Right
But I also
now.
know I'm not in demand. And I wasn't in demand even when I was writing comics.
Hmm.
I ended up doing a lot of licensed stuff.
Yeah,
I did the Superman meets the Quick Bunny comic,
I remember that.
and I loved it, and I got paid money to do it, and it was
Hmm.
like this is fine and fun, and I had no lofty illusions.
Yeah.
I knew how I fit in, I knew where I fit in, and I think that I was best for the comic industry by doing what I did on the Superman books. It was just the
Hmm.
best way for me to use my taste about superhero comics and
Hmm.
hiring the right people. There was nobody who was a superstar in the group. They may have become more important as it went on, but
Hmm.
we all kind of felt that Superman should be the superstar of our little club. And we never really had a bigger name. George Perez was the closest thing we had to a guy who was joining our group, who
Hmm.
was a bigger name, but he didn't really stay long, just because he had the stuff he wanted to do,
Right.
so it was fun to have him in there, but it wasn't his main love,
Hmm.
which Wonder Woman was, and,
Right.
War of the Gods and those things.
Hmm.
So, but I had the right guys. I had a mix of guys who I worked with at Marvel, and I had a mix, John Bogdanov and Louise Simonson and Roger Stern. I knew them at Marvel, and they came over to help me. And but I also had Jerry Ordway and Dan Jurgens on the
Hmm.
DC side of things, and it was a perfect blend of the right guys at the right time.
Now, when you left DC, I assume you left. You weren't fired there.
Where, well, I mean, last year,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, honestly, I'm 65 years old
Yeah.
now. I'm 66 in a couple of months. It's a young man's game,
Right.
and it's also like Warner Brothers has been taken over every 2 years for the last 6 years.
Mhm.
And it's just like I can't keep track of what I'm supposed to be doing and what I'm not supposed to be
Right.
doing. And it was like I literally said, if they ask you to lay anybody off, you can pick me. I know I'm a big salary, And so I wasn't quitting, but I was also opening the door to
Yeah.
I won't sue you as an old guy who's being discriminated.
It almost sounds like the Mad story when they moved everything to Burbank. They tried to negotiate, but if you had this little window to negotiate, if you didn't,
Yeah.
see
Well,
ya.
I mean, everybody knew. I mean, first of all, I was one of the first wave that moved out to Burbank
Hmm.
because I left DC editorial and I went to animation.
Hmm.
But it was always a matter of time before DC editorial was going to move.
Yeah.
And then they let Mad have its own office in New York for a while after that, even.
Yeah.
But the writing was on the wall. Everybody knew that it
Yeah.
was going to move. And if they wanted to not move, that really was their call. But it wasn't like they just suddenly had to decide
Yeah.
because it was always there. It was like
Yeah.
looming for
It
10 years
was, yeah, it was a long time. Yeah.
or 8 years. It was just
Yeah, it
looming.
was something like that, 7, 8 years. Yeah.
I mean, when I got the call to switch to animation, I mean, the question was, okay, we know the rumors are that DC is going to move. If editorial doesn't move, would you still be interested in moving? And I was like, uh, let me talk to my wife. Yes. Because honestly, I had done editorial for years and years and years, and just to get off that treadmill was kind of a relief.
Hmm.
Uh, and again, it was somebody else's turn. I did it for a lot of years at Marvel and DC. So, and I was like, I studied animation in high
Hmm.
school and college. I mean, I couldn't do animation now because it's a different world and everything's computerized and
Yeah.
not the way I learned it.
Yeah.
But I knew, again, I knew the lingo. I knew how to talk to people about the stories and about how I understood how animation worked.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to not have to deal with winter ever again my whole life.
Yeah.
And an earthquake is a maybe. Winter is definite.
Yeah.
And the humidity in the summer is the definite. And it's just
Yeah.
like, I don't want to live. I did 52 years of my life with this stuff. I'm going to do the second 52
All
with
right.
something else.
So are you in Burbank or are you out
I'm in
outlying area?
Burbank. I'm in
Oh, okay.
Burbank.
Right.
I bought a house right near where DC was
Hmm.
because I don't want to drive on highways if I don't have to. And
Hmm.
so I just was 8 blocks away from the office,
Oh,
and it was.
great.
But the only problem there was I read a lot less books
Hmm.
because I didn't have the train ride anymore.
Right.
So that was unfortunate.
Hmm.
But that's okay. I still didn't have to get on a highway, so that was good.
Hmm. Now, earlier you said that you're still open to things. So what do you mean by that? I guess, do you mean commissions or freelance stuff, or what do
Well,
you mean?
commissions, my art is again not in
I
demand.
want Dirk McGurk.
It's not in demand. Yeah, really. I would feel guilty charging a person money for Dirk McGurk. When it was a company, I still felt guilty about it, but
Mhm.
I don't think I could do that. I'll do your Dirk McGurk drawing for free. But no, it's like if somebody says, "Hey, we need to do a Scooby Doo issue, and our writer's not available this month," I can do that. I
Okay, so
I I worked on Scooby Doo and Crypto 2. I
right.
worked on Batman Brave and Bold with
Hmm.
Scooby Doo, and I watched Scooby Doo when it came on TV. I mean,
Right.
that was the right age for that. And so I can do those kinds of things. And it really, and then if they need anything, I've written a bunch of introductions and afterwards for collected editions.
Hmm.
So I'm still doing stuff, but I also am watching a lot of streaming TV.
Cool.
They invented streaming TV just in time for my retirement.
Right. Do you make any appearances at any shows or anything nowadays, or
I am willing to, but my foot issue is it's a hindrance.
right?
It's definitely a hindrance, and hopefully it's going to get better
Yeah,
at some point where I can go. And I
yeah,
mean, I just don't. I'm not interested in being wheeled in a wheelchair by people
right, right.
just because that's not fair to them. I don't like that. I don't like putting people out, you know.
Hmm.
And honestly, San Diego Comic-Con, it was so huge I couldn't stand it when I could walk.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's just so big that I
Yeah,
can't even imagine going to that ever again.
yeah.
Unless
I quit over 10 years ago. My
that's
thought is too crowded, and all the creators that I used to like are either dead or just don't go.
yeah.
So
Well, and it's so spread out. It's not even in, it started in one building and it went to another building and now it's the all that whole building plus they built another building and now it's on the streets and it's all over the place. You know, they got ballrooms and several hotels doing things. It's like it's so big that
yeah,
I just can't.
right.
And again, everything comes back to it being a young man's game. It's okay
Right.
for it to be the next guy's turn. I
Yeah.
don't resent that. I think it's natural progression. I'm all for it, and
Mhm.
I don't not looking to hold somebody out back. Make room for the next victim. That's what I say.
I think that's a healthy attitude. So,
I think so.
yeah, yeah,
But at the same time, if you want me to do something silly, I'm
yeah,
available. If you want me to do a straight Superman story just because I'm associated with Superman, I'm happy to
yeah.
do that. But
Okay.
they don't need me. They can do it without me. It would be a nice thing, but it's not necessary,
Yeah. It'd
you
just be
know.
nice to have you on call and use you every so often. That'd be
Well,
nice.
and that's I also told them it's like, look, you know, technically my severance pay is not up yet. So I still work for the company
Hmm.
uh, for another couple of weeks.
Mm,
So it's like, just call me for advice about things. I mean,
yeah.
it was in the building, you should have been talking to me about stuff. Just
Right.
all you got to do is hear what I have to say. You don't have to listen to it.
Right.
Still do whatever you want to do, but it's good to have a guy who's been in the war before telling you old war stories. That's all.
I guess my final question is, do you have anything like a book in you, like a, biography, autobiography, or anything like that, or even fiction? Uh, you know,
I don't think I'm a good enough writer, but you never know. I mean,
mm,
maybe short stories, maybe, stuff like that. I certainly, everyone wants me to write this, oh, you know where all the bodies are buried. I'm not doing a tell all. I'm not going to do a tell all. I do know where some bodies are buried. I knew,
yeah,
and some of those bodies are me,
yeah,
but I just don't. I'm a real firm believer in pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
right,
At the same time, yeah, I don't even watch those kinds of documentaries.
yeah,
I don't buy into that. Muckraking or whatever. And then whenever I read one of them, I always anything that I was actually there for,
hmm,
there's facts are wrong. So that makes me question the whole book.
yeah,
And it's just like, it would just be my opinion and my memories. And
yeah.
they're not necessarily for public consumption.
True.
It's like if we go to lunch or everybody wants to hang out, I can tell you things,
Yeah.
but I'm not looking to go on the record and ruin
Right.
somebody's day. I
Yeah.
hate it when somebody talks about me. And
Yeah.
there's guys out there who don't like me and they talk about me and it
Yeah. Yeah.
just makes me feel bad because
Yeah.
I wanted to be a good guy to everybody, but
Right.
it's not possible when you're in the corner office
Yeah.
chair.
Well, even when I do my books, I don't like to get in, or even the show, I don't like to do the warts and all. Like, tell me what Larry Hama was really like, and all that stuff. That doesn't excite me. It's like what excites me is, if you created an idea like, say, Page's stuff or Dirk McGurk and just how it came about, and you've explained that.
Yeah.
And, because I was just a high school fan, just reading this stuff, just like eating it up, thinking it was great. I had no idea who did it. I mean, I knew your name, but
Yeah.
I didn't know who you were. You
Wasn't
know,
anybody at
yeah,
that time.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, and it's
then I
like,
was barely at Marvel. The assistants didn't get credit
yeah,
except on the letters page, you know. So I
yeah,
wasn't anybody, and at the
yeah.
same time, I was just like I was happy to have a platform to just goof around.
Yeah, and then years later, you kind of did sort of become a name, and so I go, "Hey, that's that same guy who did Crazy all those
Right,
years,"
and that's
and
when
so I'd
people,
follow you into the next project because of that.
well, and
That's
that's when people who worked for me started saying, "Oh, I hate that guy," and you know, and the reality is, it's like
yeah,
when you're giving out assignments,
yeah,
you have, okay, if you're the editor of a line of comics, you have five, six, seven writing assignments a month to give out.
hmm,
Five of them are going to go to the regular writers that you've already hired,
hmm,
and then you have two assignments. That means that there's hundreds of people who you didn't call,
right,
and they are all disappointed at the least, mad at the most, and
yeah,
and some of that sticks, and they make up reasons for why you didn't hire them, and it's just
yeah,
like, well, maybe it's just because I didn't have a space for you. Maybe it's
yeah,
because you're not my favorite writer. There's
yeah,
a lot of things that have nothing to do with, you got to not take anything personally
right,
in the comic business. When you don't get picked, it's the same in Hollywood. It's like if you don't get picked for something, it's not personal. You got
yeah,
to understand that, or it shouldn't be personal. And all of
right,
the people I picked, I didn't pick because they were my buddies. They became my buddies. If things worked out and I was working with Jerry Ordway constantly for 10 years or more, he's my friend.
yeah.
I was his best man at his wedding.
Well,
You know,
that's
there's
cool. Yeah,
that, but that didn't, he had the assignment before I got there. You know? Even though I did hire him to ink John Byrne on the Fantastic Four. So we had known each other, but I had never met him,
hmm,
talked to him on the phone. And that
interesting.
was more John Byrne saying, "Hey, try to get that Ordway guy to work on me because his line work is good." And it's like, yeah, you're right. He, he's the one of the few DC guys I would want to steal.
Hmm.
I tried to get when Byrne left the Fantastic Four. This is a funny story, I think. When Byrne left the Fantastic Four, I called up Dave Gibbons. I said, "Do you want to draw the Fantastic Four?" And he goes, "Oh my God, I would love to do the Fantastic Four, but I can't because I'm doing Watchmen."
Oh,
And I said, "Watchmen? What's that? That
yeah,
you crazy? How can you not do Fantastic Four to do something called Watchmen?"
yeah,
Like so dumb. And he was right.
yeah,
And then I got John Buscema to do Fantastic Four for a little while.
mhm,
So that was okay.
yeah.
That worked out, but and then I ended up with Byrne again anyway, so that was all right too.
That's
And
cool.
then
Yeah,
I got Dave Gibbons to write World's Finest for me when
yeah.
I got to DC. So everything worked out.
Yeah. Seems like everyone eventually works on all the projects
Well,
they seem suited for,
back then it was like a way smaller pool.
Yeah, yeah,
Now
that's why. Yeah,
with the internet, we have people who are drawing in Malaysia and they're in
yeah,
Brazil, all over the place, and it's like it was not like that back in the 80s.
right,
So people can be anywhere and they can do this stuff. You can work with somebody for years and never meet them.
right.
Uh, I think that's great, but that just makes more people who are mad at you when you don't hire them.
Now I have the whole planet against me. Anyway, all right. Well, I want to thank you, Mike Carlin, for being my special guest.
I hope you got
Yeah,
something that you can use here.
yeah. Answered some questions about crazy. I know it was like something you normally don't talk about, but it's like it's where I first heard about you. So that's why I
I
was
was
like,
looking forward to
it's the
doing this.
guy.
I was looking forward to doing this just because it wasn't going to be all about Superman for a
Right,
change.
right. And maybe we could do another show later on Superman, but
Yeah,
this is what
well,
we're
I
talking about
still
now.
talked
So
about Superman, so you
yeah,
got
yeah. Hmm.
some bonus footage.
All right. Okay. Well, again, I want to thank you for being my special guest.
Well, and
And
I don't know when this is going to run, but happy Mother's Day to you
okay,
because
about a month, but that's okay. We'll have it
that's
by
when it was
Father's Day.
recorded. Yeah.
Anyway, and that wraps it up for another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Arnold, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.